Hey, good evening. Welcome to the Who's Left Podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. So, as many of you know, we were supposed to be live with former Republican Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard this evening. Ballard is running as an independent candidate for Secretary of State, and as I understand, turned in over 41,000 verified signatures this morning at the statehouse, confirming ballot access for November. Unfortunately, the mayor had something unexpected come up and cannot be here tonight. We will reschedule the interview ASAP. Stay tuned for an announcement soon. But the show goes on, and I am glad we get a chance to talk about tonight's topic, and it's honestly kind of shameful I didn't already have something on the schedule about it. July is Disability Pride Month. The observance marks the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, a landmark civil rights law signed on July 26, 1990. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the Gang of 19 public transit protest in Denver in July of 1978, good year, which laid the foundational groundwork that ultimately helped pave the way for the ADA. And while conservatives' ongoing attack on the civil rights of Black Americans, particularly the recent Supreme Court ruling neutering large portions of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, have rightfully drawn a lot of attention, the Trump administration's dismantling of civil rights protections for the disability community have gotten less attention. Tonight, I welcome two long-standing friends of the show who have made disability advocacy central to their political activism. Statehouse candidate Sharon Wight and former congressional candidate Tabitha Zeigler join me in just a moment. But first, if you care about independent progressive media, we could use your help. We don't paywall content here. We don't charge benefactors. We don't charge candidates for interviews, and we certainly don't have billionaire benefactors. We refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even to our financial detriment. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And while a paid subscription is the best way to help us grow and sustain this project, you can help in other ways by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. Get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let's give a warm welcome to our guests tonight. There's Sharon Wight and Tabitha Zeigler. Ladies, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So, listen, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this with me here at the last minute on short notice. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. We still want to give the people content on a week when we had a monkey wrench thrown at us. So thank you both.
Absolutely. So happy to do it and glad to have friends like you who are willing to put me on these things. Not everybody has that.
So, as I was saying before I invited you in, it is Disability Pride Month here in July, and I, am kind of disappointed with myself that I didn't have something on the schedule to commemorate this. Disability advocacy is very important to me and my family. As folks may know, I've written about, I've talked about before. My son, when he was with us, he was born disabled, and things like the ADA allowed him to live a fulfilling normal life, to go to school, to graduate high school, to do fun things with the other kids. And we're 5 minutes in, and I'm already getting misty. Stop me. But Sharon, what I sort of know Tabitha's story, and I'm going to come to her in a second. But what drew you to disability advocacy? Why are you out here advocating for the disability community?
So it was not a straight road. We'll put it that way. I actually, when I was in elementary school, my Girl Scout leader was deaf. And so I think that is really where this all started, was back in elementary school, where she was my Girl Scout leader for all of the years that I was in Girl Scouts. And when I had the opportunity in college to take American Sign Language, I said, yes, that's definitely something I'm going to do. But fast forward a few more years, and in 2020, one of the things I think happened to a lot of people in 2020, we were at home, we had maybe more time on our hands, at least some of us younger millennials that didn't have kiddos that were running around. And I had the opportunity to really start analyzing my own mental health, analyzing a bunch of things about myself, basically, because I didn't have other things to do at that point. And I kind of started exploring sensory issues that I had had my whole life, along with a myriad of other things. Well, that led me to wanting to study in a master's degree, online education and sensory processing disorder. So I have a master's degree where most of the work that I have done has been in that area. And here in Fort Wayne, we have something called the Inclusion Institute, which started at our Center for Independent Living. There are 13 of those across the state. And the one up here in Fort Wayne has a program called the Inclusion Institute that actually trains people to be disability advocates. So there was just this kind of very linear but not linear trail towards that. And I very much live by the motto of anybody can become disabled at any time. I had some major surgeries back in 2022, and shortly after those surgeries, I fell in my shower, which took about a year to diagnose, and it turned out I had a ruptured disc, but I used a cane for the majority of 2023 into 2024.
Wow. And thank you for sharing that personal story, and Tabitha, same with you. This is very, very much personal to you. You have children that are autistic, and as I understand, you are neurodivergent yourself.
Yeah. So I had COVID babies, and whenever everybody was trying to do all of the things, I was trying to figure my kids out. And, I think a lot of us that had kids at that point, we thought maybe our kids weren't hitting their milestones because everybody had the mask on. So they didn't have the opportunity to see people's mouths. And that's normally how people develop speech. But turns out that was not the case. So took my first kiddo to the doctor. Originally, they said global developmental delay. And then not too long after that, the doctor said, well, how do you feel about testing him for autism? And I was like, look, you're the doctor, you're the expert, so we're going to go with what you say. So tested him for autism. He came back at autism level 3. And that was the first time that I learned, once you have one child that has a disability like autism, your other children are more likely to have it as well. So once the twins arrived at about 2 years old, 2 years old is sort of the cutoff for developmental issues, because you have to let the children develop. Sometimes you can kind of get like a false positive if you test them too early. So after they were 2, tested both the twins, they also came back with autism 3. So there are right now 3 levels of autism. Level 1 would be considered high functioning. A lot of people also in the past used words like Asperger's, which we no longer use. Has a little bit too much of a Nazi reference. So people don't like that for good reason. And then after my kiddos, I was watching them and I was like, I'm pretty sure I did that when I was a kid. And so I was already into autism advocacy and disability rights advocacy and all of that. And I thought, if I'm already advocating for the kids, this would be a good opportunity to get myself tested. And then if I am also part of that community, then I can start to advocate for the adults as well. So went and got myself tested. They gave me a battery of tests. One test in particular was a 10-point scale. Essentially, if you were 4 or under, you didn't have autism. If you were 5 and higher, the likelihood was greater. So I asked the gentleman, I was like, right, so what number did I get? And he's like, an 8. I was like, right, so I'm super autistic then. And that's sort of how I just lean into a lot of these things with humor. Though right now there's a lot of things going on that are not funny, but we also have to find joy in all of this craziness. So that's a little bit of my entry into autism and disability advocacy.
You mentioned that kind of finding out as an adult later in life, and you've gone through life, and no one ever suggested that you were autistic. And I think the more we learn about the massive diversity within people's brains and the way they work, we're finding out more and more about autism. And I think, and I haven't gotten tested or anything yet, but the more I study this and the more I think about it, I think I might be sort of in that stage 1 a little bit myself. But then I've also said things like, oh, well, it's a spectrum, we're all on it. And I've been told that you shouldn't say that. Can you tell me why that's maybe problematic?
Well, I'll give the gay example, right? So, you have that whole gay in college thing, and that's a bit offensive to the other lesbians, right? That are out there sort of in the trenches and like are lesbian all day long. And it's not really something you can switch off. So autism is sort of the same, right? Like you can't be like a little autistic. You're like either all or none. And there's certain triggers that people have and things like that. I think heading into it at a later age, I'm also learning, right? And I try to be really cautious and respectful of others, especially people in the community that would kind of see me as like a newbie. So, I think everything with disability is like other things. You just ask, and the more that you ask questions, the more that you try to have like good, meaningful conversations with the disability community, it's really easy then, because they'll just tell you, especially with things like diagnosis. If a person is really interested in finding out, there's no right or wrong way, but if you ask the community, that's normally where you find that information. When you start asking around, they'll say, oh, I went to this doctor, I really like them, or I go to this psychologist, I really like them, I go to this therapy, I like that. And I would just tell people, just lean in and ask questions. I mean, very few people are going to be super offended. I think they're probably going to be kind of flattered in a way that you care enough to ask.
Yeah. And I don't want to, like, here I am, able-bodied adult, knock on wood, right? And it's like stolen valor in a way. It's like, no, you don't get to claim to be a member of the community. Come on, like you're barely there. It's like, it's good you're an ally, but you barely have to navigate any of the hurdles that other folks out there have to. Sharon, that makes me think of like the sort of invisible disabilities. I've known people that have MS, for example, and that kind of varies from day to day. Like on a good day, you can be up and getting around and nobody would know a thing. And other days you need a cane or you need a wheelchair even. And I've heard folks say to people with MS, well, you don't look disabled. In your case, you're doing okay now, but when you had to use that cane, I imagine that sort of put you in shoes that you weren't used to walking in. I'm sure there were sort of good days and bad days where maybe some days you needed it, some days you didn't need it. Do people give you a hard time about it? Like, oh, like, what's that all about? You look like you're fine.
Well, and I also, so like I said, I went through testing for sensory processing disorder, which is something you actually have to have an autistic, or if you're going to get diagnosed as an adult, you have to have an autism diagnosis. That's just the standard of care, at least right now, or at least based at on the what I'm going to be talking to Tabitha about some things after this, because I think I need some more information. But I actually have a couple of different invisible disabilities. I have blood clotting disorder, and I have fibromyalgia. And both of those things combined, there are days where I just can't get up and go do the things that I want to do. Honestly, that's one of the reasons why PIN is so amazing for Progressive Indiana Network, is because even on the days when I can't get up and maybe go canvas or do other things that I would like to be doing out in the community, I know that I can come here and I can talk to people. Talking is something that, for the most part, goes really well for me. Except when I had COVID in 2020, I developed aphasia. For those of you who don't know, aphasia is when you just sometimes can't find your words. And it's a little bit more than just the occasional tip of your tongue type thing. It happens a lot more regularly. And as someone who studies communication, it was absolutely horrific to be dealing with a communication disorder. And so it very much is good days and bad days, having to monitor my stress level, having to monitor my sleep, having to monitor all of these different things. So that way I don't end up in a flare up while I'm running for office that then takes me out for a number of weeks or months. But yeah, definitely have had those questions where, oh, well, you don't, like, you look fine, or even friends of mine who are in the disabled community. It seems like it has to be very visual in order for people to actually believe it. And I think that one of the things, going back to what Tabitha said, that we have to be really careful about is whether it's someone saying that they're gay, whether it's someone saying that they're disabled, whether it's someone saying, you know, something that we can't outwardly see, is to just not question that. Lean into learning about what it is that makes, or that is important to them, rather than trying to argue with them about their identity.
So, and I'm glad we're talking about these sort of invisible disabilities, or the things that maybe not present where in such a way that it's obvious, right? For folks who might be listening and aren't watching the screen, I've got a special background put up tonight, and that is actually the Disability Pride flag, which I didn't know was a thing, sadly. And it's 5 stripes on a black background, the black representing like mourning for the people who have been victims of neglect and abuse and ableism and just misunderstanding, and the 5 different stripes on there. They're red, gold, white, blue, and green. The red is for physical disabilities, and those are the ones that are obvious and that we think of. And when you think the disability community, like that's what you think, right? But it is so much wider than that and broader than that. The gold is for neurodiversity, and that's what we were talking about with Tabitha. The white is for invisible disabilities and disabilities that haven't even yet been diagnosed. Think of the fibromyalgia that you were talking about. Blue, the emotional and psychiatric disabilities, including mental illness and anxiety and depression, and green is for sensory disabilities, including deafness, blindness, lack of smell and taste, and audio processing disorder, and those sort of things, like your troop leader when you were a kid. And I think, thank you for the compliment about Progressive Indiana Network. One of the things I, think about when we do the series of virtual town halls that we're doing, we did in the primary, we're doing them again for the general beginning in late August, is, folks that can't get out to these actual town halls, not just because of physical disabilities, because of overwhelming paralysis, being in public with large groups of other people. That's the thing as well. I think that would be part of that emotional and psychiatric disabilities as well. So in a way, I'd like to think that we're providing an accessibility service. But
I just wanted to hop on.
You absolutely are. Sorry,
please,
Tabitha.
Tabitha.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to hop on real fast and say also, this came up recently in a conversation that I was having about invisible disabilities, and autism is actually also an invisible disability because my son, for example, I made a video the other day about scripting, because if you look at my children, they look normal, right?
Mhm.
So like, if you have a child that has something very visible that you can distinguish, that maybe you think something else is happening, people give those children a lot more grace. And
Yep.
autism, ADHD, like the neurodiversity umbrella, sensory things, those kids, 9 times out of 10, the people are like, oh, that's a bad kid. And so
Right,
I'm
right.
also,
or
yeah,
they're
like
over dramatic, or they're emotional,
yeah,
or like all of these were these were all words that I heard about people growing up that really ultimately were describing their neurodivergence.
right. And the reason that I say anything about it, right, is because I was one of those that I was like, I'm not ever going to put my kids online. Like, there's a lot of weirdos, especially right now. And then I made the decision recently that I was like, right, because of the current circumstance with the disability community, I think it's important to show people, my children, to show what autism looks like, so that you're giving them better vocabulary to actually be allies for them. So, anyway, I just want to mention that real fast, that like 80% of the invisible, I think it's 80% of disability is invisible. Is that correct, Sharon?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
I think it is.
And I think it's important, Tabitha, to your point, to point out to folks, that the disability community is much greater than people think, and folks within that community and their allies need to demonstrate this solidarity, particularly right now, because things are not going great for the community. We've made so many strides since that original protest in Denver in 1978 that I mentioned in the open, that sort of set the table for adaptations in public transit, and then later on the ADA in 1990, and we made great strides since that time in making society more inclusive for folks. You think about things like wheelchair ramps, right? Everywhere. They're mandated by law now because of the ADA. Things like ramps on buses, handles in bathrooms, and toilet adaptations, and closed captioning on TV, curb cuts on the sidewalks. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on. And those things don't just benefit people with disabilities. We're finding that there are benefits for all sorts of folks in society by lifting up things for the bottom, right?
Yep. Well, and another thing that I always, whenever I'm having these conversations, is I point out that becoming disabled is the only, we'll say, protected class group for right now. We'll say protected class group that anybody can join at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us at some point in our lives, even if it's just temporary, well, all of us are going to grow old. So all of us are going to eventually join the disabled community as well. And so we're really doing a big disservice, obviously, to our seniors who are having to fight a lot of these battles. We're doing a disservice to people who have lived out in their communities for their entire adult lives. And we have these laws going into place saying that they don't need community care when they've clearly been living just fine, just needed a little bit of help. And so that particular moment that came down in June, where we were saying that people should be living in institutions, essentially, is what the language is starting to say again. It's abhorrent, is what we're doing.
Yeah, let me fill in the details on that, Sharon, if you don't mind. So in June, the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel issued this opinion. And this is only about 3 weeks ago, right? And it argues that neither the Americans with Disabilities Act nor Section 504 requires states to provide community-based care instead of institutionalization. The principal deputy attorney, General Lenora Pettit, admits that this reading is out of step with the common understanding of the Olmstead Supreme Court decision that mandated home and community-based care instead of institutions. We've got states like Texas and others that are arguing that the integration mandate itself is unconstitutional. Tabitha, it sounds like this Trump administration is trying to send people back into institutional settings.
Yeah, I've actually got some notes. I'm one that believes everybody should always go back to history, because normally there's a circle back or a rebranding, if you will. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to read from some notes here. So, by the late 1800s, Indiana authorities believed criminality, mental problems, and pauperism was hereditary. Various laws were enacted based on this belief. In 1907, Governor J. Frank Hanley approved the first state eugenics law, making sterilization mandatory for certain individuals in state custody. This is in Indiana. Sterilizations halted in 1909 by Governor Thomas R. Marshall. The Indiana Supreme Court ruled in the 1907 law unconstitutional in 1921, citing denial of due process under the 14th Amendment. 1927 law reinstated sterilization, adding court appeals. At approximately 2,500 total in-state custody were sterilized. Governor Otis Bowen approved the repeal of all sterilization laws in 1974. By 1977, related restrictive marriage laws were repealed. And except for the gap between 1921 and the enactment of 1927, the sterilization laws remained intact in Indiana until 1974. So I thought that would be really important to add some of that stuff in there as a background, because then you can understand that this is not a new thing. This is a continuous loop in eugenics that is always affecting the disability community. And part of eugenics is always institutionalization, leads to sterilization. And obviously, this doesn't just affect the disability community, because anybody that they found was unworthy, much like how they're viewing the unhoused community right now, the indigenous community, the Latin American community, there was a lot of sterilizing going on. And so when you put too much power in the hands of people that think others are less than them, this is always where it leads. So I just figured I'd give a little context historically for this conversation. I appreciate you letting me read my notes.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about eugenics, again, for the folks that don't know, this is basically the selective breeding of humans, right? Sterilizing the undesirable so they can't breed, putting the people that we don't want in society away from the others. And, folks like Elon Musk now talking about, repopulating the human species, populating the stars, even with, the best and the brightest with his seed, right? Which is, of course, the best. And ironic, because I think Elon Musk is probably on the spectrum himself, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm glad you mentioned the unhoused community, right? Because that's, we talk about, like Sharon mentioned, the bad kids, right? The folks that you see them acting out in public as children. It's like, oh, why won't their parents wrangle them and take care of them? And you see the same sort of language applied to the unhoused as adults. It's like, oh, what's wrong with these people? They're bad people. And many times it's the white stripe or the blue stripe, or the yellow stripe. It is these people have untreated or undiagnosed mental illness, and are not getting the treatment they deserve, and our government currently, the Trump administration, the Braun administration, wants to take those people and institutionalize them as well.
I was just going to jump in there real fast and say, I have a few friends of mine that worked with different like unhoused nonprofits and stuff like that. And we've had this conversation a lot. So what happens with the disabled community, right, is if they don't have a caretaker, if they can't live independently, and if they don't have family, they become unhoused. So when someone becomes part of the unhoused community, you could be looking at someone that has autism or ADHD or schizophrenia or IDD. And this is a slippery slope with boxing everybody in one, like, I'm going to use this term. I don't know if people know it, but there used to be this thing called ugly boxes in like the early 1900s, late 1800s. And that was specifically for kids like this. So let's say you had a child that was Down syndrome, or you had a child missing a limb or something like that. There were literal like wooden boxes that you could go and put that child in. And it's pretty horrid. Yeah. But we're sort of like rapidly inching back to those kind of days where it's like, right, these people are unworthy because they don't have the specifications that we like, or they're not worth serving. And when people become part of the unhoused community, obviously it's not nice because everybody needs shelter and nourishment and everything, but people are looked down upon. There's a lot of sexual abuse that happens. I have a friend of mine that runs a nonprofit for the Unhoused in Indianapolis, where we were talking about this one lady who was on the spectrum, who was sexually assaulted. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that go on. So it's not as simple as like, right, we're going to cut funding for all these people and we're going to put them in institutions. The institutions aren't there because they closed them all down. And in addition to that, they cost more money. Like that is why 1997, we had that big thing go down in New Albany, and that changed everything in Indiana. They shut down everything. And then whenever they were trying to figure out how they can do better, they actually found out that it was cheaper to put the power in the hands of the family members who take care of their own kids. And now everybody's rolling back this eugenics ball like, hey, this is a good idea. And I was like, no, it's a shitty fucking idea. It was always a shitty idea. So all of this leads to, we're going to kill these people. So that is the end of the eugenics process. And I just want to add in here that, the Nazis got the eugenics thoughts from us. We cultivated that here first. We were doing that in the 1800s and the 1900s. And they're like, wow, that looks like a plan. So I think people need to be very aware of how, like, this isn't even a slippery slope at this point. This is like, a Ferris wheel of death or something. It's just fucking horrible. And I'm so glad anyway that you're taking the time to do this, because many, many people don't think that it could be them. They don't think that it applies to their family. They don't think that, like, I could never have a child with autism. I could never have a kid with Down syndrome. No one in my family is disabled. Well, just wait until grandma slips in the shower.
Yep.
Well,
exactly. And to Sharon's point, yeah, it could happen to anybody at any time, right?
Well, and let's break it down here for just a second, right? Say you have someone who is knowingly disabled. They're in a wheelchair. They are getting services already. Okay. That individual is not allowed to build up their assets if they are getting services, which means they are at significantly more risk to becoming unhoused in the first place if something falls through the cracks. And so as we are making more and more of these decisions, as we are making these changes, making it more difficult to get Medicaid, making it more difficult for them to get the things they need, making it more expensive for them to get their services that they've gotten previously, we are inching these people towards being unhoused. And then when they become unhoused, we treat them like dirt, which is just unacceptable. So we set up the system so that way this happens. And then we wonder why there are so many people who are unhoused, especially when people are not being paid at the levels that they should be paid in order to maintain a living wage right now.
So yeah, you've got a couple things there that I wanted to touch on, and you mentioned the income thresholds, right? And I think a lot of people that are our age who have aging parents are beginning to deal with things like this. Like, oh, if you're you got a parent, a grandparent that needs to go into a long-term care facility, they have to like liquidate all their assets. You can't like have any money. Your net worth has to be below a certain threshold, and it's really, really low to qualify for Medicaid. And now, since last summer, when the Trump administration and his lackeys in Congress passed this so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they've cut something like $1 trillion in Medicaid. And those cuts are really just starting to go into effect now. And the way they achieve these cuts is that they're making people jump through extra hoops. Right. So you've got to go through the qualification. You got to fill out the paperwork instead of once a year. Now it's like twice a year. And you have to prove to them that you're worthy of their and they use this excuse of waste, fraud, and abuse to say that, people, end users, people that are desperate and in need of government services are somehow cheating the system, when the people that are really cheating the system, it's inevitably the big hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies. And we've got a case in Indiana right now, something like $750 million in Medicaid fraud perpetuated by hospitals. State doesn't want to touch that because those are the folks that are the donors to the politicians. And, in who suffers, right? It's the people who are actually in need of services. I think of our time and when we had to, navigate those sort of hurdles with my son. And it's a lot for people who are well-resourced. And I mean, I could barely keep up. I'm the worst at paperwork. Oh my God. But it's a full-time job for so many people. And now they're making you do this twice or 4 times as much. Sharon, can you talk about that some?
Well, so let's look at it from the neurodivergent side as well. There's a lot of people who are neurodivergent, speaking for myself as well, that aren't good at paperwork. Not good at either. We're not good at remembering to get it done, or you and I have joked before about how I live on vibes a little bit.
It's overwhelming.
It's over. Yeah. And the thing is, one of the things that I've talked about a number of times out on the trail is that we make these processes so flippin' difficult that even really well-resourced people are not able to navigate it, or they get tired of navigating it because it is just so difficult. And I think that that's kind of what they're trying to do, is they're trying to beat us down, but to what end? Like
100%, I agree with you, because
it's soft eugenics, right, Tabitha?
Right.
It's we're not going to put them in the institutions.
At the same time, people are vilified if they want to leave this plane of existence of their own hand. We'll say it that way.
So I'll use my family as an example. So I've got 3 little kids with autism. My oldest is under 7, and they were participating in ABA. And then whenever Indiana changed that law, April 1st, they already told me, they're like, look, they're going to, drastically reduce their services. So then I had to pull the twins out in May. And then I had to pull Kai out, my older one, a few weeks later. And so that means I've got 3 little kids with autism all summer, no resources, because we are still on the Medicaid waiver, which God knows whenever that's going to come through, because they halted that. I get SSI for the kids, and I'm thinking they're going to probably make some changes to that as well. My older child is having some extreme behavioral issues, so I'm trying to now get him into a special charter school for autism. And I'm very much against charter schools, but in this case, I'm like, I don't know that kid's going to survive public school without getting kicked out. And I'm not necessarily certain that I have the capacity to homeschool him and or all 3 of them. I know a lot of people are doing it, but when you have kids with autism that are high needs, high energy, all of that, good luck finding anybody to watch them. Nobody's going to watch these kids for you. It's just not a thing. So if you're not on the Medicaid waiver or whatever, especially if you're a single parent, that takes you out of the workforce most likely. But like right now, I couldn't work a full-time job if I tried, because they're going to call me at work to come and get my kids at school because they had a behavioral issue or something like that. And, you know, you can't do that for very many times before you get fired. So now, I think that's a lot of people in Indiana in particular, because they're putting the squeeze on us. And so right now they're trying to get these people, these disabled people, like they have a work requirement, right? And if you don't meet your work requirement, then you lose your benefits. And they're already scraping the bottom of the barrel. But for these parents right now that were getting paid to care for their children that have extreme disabilities that are getting cut, they literally, like some of these people are having to like process colostomy bags and all these different things. And they literally are probably working the equivalent of like 3 full-time jobs. Like, I don't even know how I'm doing what I'm doing, just like full transparency. But I know without a shadow of a doubt, because it started to happen in my old job, there's going to come a point for these parents where they run out of FMLA, because you only have so much of that, even though it's federal, right? So you're going to run out of FMLA first. Then you're going to run out of vacation time. Then you're going to hope that you can squeak out whatever agreement you can with your boss. And then that fourth option is termination. And good luck trying to find a different job after that, especially if you don't get along with your boss, because that boss can then tell your new boss that person's unreliable. But you're not actually unreliable. You're just trying to do the best that you can with your autistic or disabled child. So this state is really putting the screws to people in the disability community right now.
Well, and then on the flip side of that, I have a friend who actually does exactly what you just described, but for her, for one of her step parents. And so on the flip side of that, you also have people in our generation that are going to have to start caring for our parents and, you know, are going to have limited options as well.
And they mandate poverty on all sides of this, right? They make it hard to keep a job. You can't go out into the workforce. You have to take care of a kid. That's, you know, that's even if you have things like paid time off or vacation time. You know, Indiana is a quote unquote right to work state, right? You know, I've worked for places where you call in 1 or 2 times, you're just done, right? And you can't take care of your family that way. So then you're reliant on the government to sort of subsidize you being able to take care of your kids. Well, okay, they want you to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and go out there and get a job. You need somebody to take care of the kids. You know, it was where they would mandate, you know, we have the public schools, they have the IEPs. They're supposed to like make adaptations for your kids. You know,
universal child care would certainly put a dent in that, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. And you know, our child care situation in this state is a travesty. The public schools, who are the you know, the educator of last resort, child care of last resort in many cases for kids that are you know, on the spectrum or have disabilities or what have you. Their funding is being cut. It's all being siphoned off to these charter schools and private Christian schools and what have you, and they can select what students they want. They're not going to take the high need students, right? So you're going to wind up where the kids that need the help are stuck in public schools, not going to have anywhere else to go. And if you take this to its logical, you know, conclusion, that's going to be the only kids in the public schools. If you know, you do these universal vouchers and completely privatize education, and that you've basically just taken the long route to reinstitutionalizing people. Well,
and then so as a childless woman who didn't necessarily choose to be a childless woman, JD Vance, not everybody chooses it. But there's 2 sides of this, right? There's this constant push right now, have babies, have babies, have babies. But don't you dare have a baby that's not a perfect baby. And if you choose not to fight your own body, if you choose not to fight society, if you choose to not have children, you're a villain. If you choose to have children that aren't perfect, you're a villain. It doesn't make sense. So much of what they're doing right now just doesn't have it. It's frustrating.
Those breeders, I have to tell you, they're a whole different thing. Those women, I would love to get in a room with some of them, because we could have some serious conversations. It's like, you want to have all of us have, 10 children. I know I have one child out here with me. You want us to have 10 children with what help, and like, how do you accomplish this? Because you have to have a support system, and not everybody chooses to be.
Oh, Tabitha dropped out.
Either, right? Like, oftentimes that's something.
Sorry, Tabitha, you're cutting in and out there a little bit, but again, let's take this to where it goes. They want to take us back to the 1850s, right? Well, you have 12 kids, maybe a handful of them survive. Back then, what would they do with the disabled kids? If you had one that wasn't, perfect when it came out, they'd throw them in the river. Like they're taking us back. The common wisdom was that Republicans want to take us back to 1953 before Brown versus Board of Education. I think they want to take us back to 1853 before the Civil
I think
War,
that's more accurate.
Germ theory was discovered, before there was modern medicine. They want to go back to hope and pray, and that's all you get.
Take us back to polio, and then you're going to have a bunch of disabled kids that way too, because you're busy giving everybody measles because you can't get your shit together with the vaccines. So, I mean, these people, I don't get it. I don't understand, because they want us to involuntarily pump out as many children as we possibly can while not taking care of them. Like, to what end? Just complete subjugation of women and children and all the rest.
So I guess, Sharon, let's assume, big assumption, by the way, that we can the sane and compassionate among us can retake political power in this country and sort of rebuild these institutions and the infrastructure of a caring economy and a caring world. What does that look like? What do we have to do to build things back? Like, what's the end goal? Where should we be aiming? What does aiming high and maybe only getting half look like, In
a perfect world, well, for me, in a perfect world, everything would always have closed captions. I would, because I've got auditory processing disorder. We've talked about that before. Oh, we lost Tabitha.
She froze. I'll bring her back when she starts moving again.
It would be like a perfect example is some of these older retrofitted buildings. They have, they might have the things that they're supposed to have, but it's the absolute minimum. It would be no longer reaching for the absolute minimum that keeps you out of trouble. It would be reaching for what's actually going to be good for people. It would be, for example, if you have to have a ramp, not having a ramp that's 2/3 of a mile long in order to get where you're going, a ramp that goes directly to the front door right next to the people who are walking up the stairs.
Get down.
It would be, it would be, first of all, just people showing care and compassion again.
Yeah. And Tabitha, you dropped out. I don't know if you caught everything, but we were talking about, what we should be aiming for. Like, we're going to get through this moment that we're in right now and rebuild something better, a more human and compassionate government that actually takes care of its people. What should we be aiming for? What should we be asking for? What does an ideal society that takes care of its disabled population look like?
Well, I think we need to do as much mutual aid as we possibly can right now, because if we don't start to be proactive about taking care of our people, without expecting the government to do it, we could end up in a really bad position. So I think mutual aid right now, while we're working on replacing every single one of them that is against humanitarian values, because that's what it is, right? Like, it doesn't matter whether it's gay rights, trans rights, disability rights, women's rights, children's rights. I mean, if you're not a straight white man at this point, you're not being looked after. So anybody that is not very openly and authentically speaking clearly on these issues and what their plan is, like, that's what I'm looking at from all these candidates right now, right? I'm like, good on paper if you say you're a Democrat, for example, but what are you actually going to do? Like, how are you actually going to serve the community? How are you going to serve your people? Because I do think we're at this point right now where it's like, you need to speak up and you need to put your money where your mouth is. And, you know, you're not going to beat these Republicans if you don't say those things. You have to say it and you have to have a plan.
Yeah, and you know, for far too many Democrats, I think that we've sort of been painted into a corner where Republican extremism has made Democrats into the conservative party, where we're just trying to protect what we have, and what we have has been whittled away so much already. And you know, things like these Medicaid cuts that are going into effect now, things like the ramping up of institutionalization, you know, things like the cuts to public schooling, which is, you know, there to take care of all children equally. Like, we don't want to protect this system. We need something far better. Well,
Tabitha, I want to say something too.
Yeah.
I think a mistake that people are making right now, right, is just assuming that they're going to win. Like, our candidates need more bite. Like, they're so, not everybody, but I've just noticed a trend, right? It's like they're too cautious and they're unwilling to go that extra step. You know, like, I'll use ICE as an example, right? Like, people still struggle to say things like abolish ICE. It's a much more comfortable stance to be like, well, you know, let's see if we can work with these people. Meanwhile, while they're shooting people in the face, like, the disability issue is sort of a similar thing, right? It's like maybe we'll see if we can work with these people. And I think we run the risk of letting the Republicans circle back and then do the layup for us, you know? Like, if we give them too much room and not just sort of pummel them right away while we get the opportunity, if we let too much time pass, then what I'm noticing happens on the other side is they are also watching public opinion. And if they think it's getting a bit too dangerous, then they might just like throw a layup and be like, hey, you know, like, I'm going to push back a bit. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of these podcasters right now, right? That they're just like the Tucker Carlson. These people are now doing the things that the Democrats should have been doing, like, straight out the gate. Like, when you have an open lane, you take that layup, right? Like, we come from a basketball state. Everybody knows that. Like, give the fastest kid the ball, let them make the layup every single time. Chuck it, throw it at them. Like, the Democrats right now are just sitting too cautiously. And they're betting on the Republicans are just so evil and it's just so bad that people wouldn't dare vote for them. And I think that is political suicide, personally, like, coming from a very red area and actually, like, very much caring what happens, because this is a life or death issue for my family and for other families like that. Like, we can't have people that are unclear on their language with things like disability rights and disability justice, or LGBTQ plus rights and justice and immigrant rights and justice. Like, These things are layups. This is what the people want. Just say the thing. Speak to your people.
I'm glad you mentioned the folks on the far right kind of encircling us. What's happening is the fascists will offer a leftist critique of capitalism, and they don't mean it. They intend to turn capitalism up to 11 and exploit people and use people as expendable. Because what inevitably you're describing is capitalism views certain people as expendable, Tabitha. And we need to work toward building a society in which no one is expendable. And that, frankly, is the most pro-life thing one can do. We've only got a couple minutes here. Unfortunately, this has flown. There's so much, we barely touched the surface. But is there Tabitha, in like an organization you would like to highlight that is doing good work right now that you can point people toward, that that we could help out, or that is just doing good things out there that needs to be get their flowers?
Are you asking me or Sharon?
Well, you start, and then I'll come to Sharon with the same question.
I am trying to think what that group of my friends is. I will send it to you for the comments. But there are a few of us actually working on a group right now that we're trying to sort of fill the holes that Indiana is leaving open for the autism community. So it's called the Unique Needs Alliance. And we're kind of working on that right now because we're anticipating there are going to be a bunch of people that are suffering. But I'll get you that contact information for my friend that does a lot of good work with the unhoused community as well. Everybody can always reach out to like the Autism Society of America and some of these national organizations. They're good landing pages to find other resources. So I would just direct people there for now.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I will link those in the show notes once you send those to me, Tabitha. Sharon, how about you? Is there an organization you'd like to point people toward?
Up here in Fort Wayne, the League for the Blind and Disabled is helping so many people. Like I said, they are an authorized Center for Independent Living. I believe their catchment is 13 counties up here, but if you call them, they'll help you. And that's where I got my my work, or my kind of, for lack of a better word, certification in disability advocacy. And they're doing a lot of really wonderful things. And one last thing I want to say here, if you're not following me yet, please do. But one of the things that's most important to me is diversity. I feel like a world of diversity is better than one where everybody is the same. And I think back on my own public education and how, and how, whether it was because someone was an immigrant, whether it was because someone was from a different part of the city, or whether they were disabled, it helped enrich my education. And that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this. But definitely the League for the Blind and Disabled up here in Fort Wayne.
Well, and that is something I assume diversity, racial diversity, sexual diversity, gender diversity, different abilities diversity is something you are going to fight for when you make it to the Statehouse after you win in November. How can folks connect with you online, learn more about your campaign, for example?
So I have a website, www.electsharonwight, that's WIGHT.com. And it is also translated into 13 different languages currently. So you can go to my website, and if you speak a different language, please, first of all, look at it in that other language and let me know if the translations are not correct. You can also reach me at www.facebook.com/electsharonwight. And this weekend, I have a fundraiser with a few of my friends up here in Fort Wayne. We are going to be streaming live a Dungeons and Democracy game. So you'll get to see me be just a little bit silly if you tune into that.
Very good. We're looking forward to that. I think that's a neat idea, and more campaigns should do stuff like that. Tabitha, I know you talk about issues affecting the autism and disability community frequently on your podcast. How can folks find you?
Well, you can find me on any of social media at Tabitha Zeigler. You can email me at Staring Down the Storm. At the podcast, you can go to tabithazeigler.com. You can pretty much find everything if you just Google Tabitha Zeigler, I think.
All right. Very good. Excellent. Well, ladies, thank you both for joining me here tonight. Again, it has been an honor to share this conversation with you. We're going to continue to talk about these sort of things here in this space because we barely touched the surface. But in addition to Sharon's Dungeons and Democracy game on Saturday, she's going to be with me here Sunday morning for Who's Left This Week. That is Indiana's only unapologetically progressive Sunday morning politics show. We will be joined by another State House candidate, Alan Miller, who's running in District 73. We will discuss the week's top Indiana stories, plus U.S. and international news through a Hoosier lens. It's already shaping up to be an incredibly busy and trying week. Tune in on YouTube, Facebook Live, or on Substack at progressiveindiana.net. A programming note on YouTube: the Sunday show will be live only on the Progressive Indiana Network channel going forward. You will still be able to catch the replay on the Who's Left feed. Again, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Tabitha, for a great discussion. Thank you for watching and listening. Connect with me online at whosleft.us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads, at Who's Left on all the rest. Direct message me at any of those sites with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me at scott@whosleft.us. Last thing, please forward this show to a friend and have them pass it on to let us keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I am Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.